Hey there, welcome to the Twilight of Empires mod. This is a, well, I think you could call it a total conversion for sea power, because it adds up to 200 new units across 14 new nations. Don't worry, you're not going to be sitting here going through 200 different units. This is just covering the US side to give you a glimpse of what this mod can do. The backstory of this mod is, with the end of the Second World War in, yes, 1947, the world powers found themselves on the precipice of a new era. The great powers that defined the pre-war period gave way for the new world superpowers: the United States, the Soviet Union, and the British Empire. For the next 50 years, the world would be defined by this great power struggle, in an era known as the Twilight of Empires. It is a massive alternate history mod. It is starting in around the 1960s all the way up to the early 1990s. And it introduces not just a whole bunch of different units, but a whole bunch of different capabilities as well. So I'm going to go over a bunch of these US ships. You can see I have a lot of them. This is not a task force as you would see it. For example, a Franklin submarine typically doesn't sail on the surface, but this is just to show you what is in this mod. We're going to start out with the Big E, the Enterprise. The Enterprise is actually a new class of ship, and this is the Enterprise class aircraft carrier, but not the typical version, shall we say, because they have some really decent defenses now, with the Sea Sparrows as well as the Standard missiles, so they themselves can shoot out to 90 miles, and on top of that, they have the radar to back it up. They got the Spy 1 air search radar out to 300 miles. Of course, you could argue, well, yeah, that's all cool and everything, but the real firepower of an aircraft carrier lies in her wing. Yes, it does. And this aircraft carrier gets a couple of the new F-14 Deltas. These guys are going to come with some increased weaponry. We have the AIM-54C, you might know that, the Phoenix. This one is at a 100-mile range. That's typical for the game. But then I also get access to the AIM-98 Alpha. This is the Seekbat 2. Out to 350 miles. You're sacrificing 100 knot of speed, but hey, if you can shoot somebody 3.5 times the range of the Phoenix, yeah, I'm all for it. It is also a secondary anti-surface role, same as the Phoenix, but it's just going to keep you that much safer. I haven't looked at all the Soviet units yet, so I don't know if it's possible for them to shoot down a jet at 350 miles, but I rather doubt it. That is just one of the new weapon systems. We also have the AGM-123 Skipper, a short-ranged anti-ship missile. It is laser-guided. That's interesting. I'm not sure why you would want to use this if you get access to a weapon like that, but okay. It also get access to the Paveway 2. It gets access to the GBU-10, the Zuni rocket pod, the Mark 84, is a 2,000 pound or 900 kilogram bomb, and of course you have your gun available if everything else fails. That's just one of the aircraft, but there's more. We also have access to the A7F. This one is not changed that much. The A6F is... because you're going to be getting the AGM... what was it? The AGM-109? Yeah, this thing can now launch Tomahawks at other targets. It is an anti-surface Tomahawk target installation. So you might get a land attack to go well. You might get... or rather, you might get an anti-ship attack to go well with these things. Or you can just throw them in to confuse everybody. As for the E2C... I think that there's not much changed here. These things still have a range of 250 miles. And of course... yes, the Enterprise can search now out to 300 and something miles, but is that really preferable? Because you're going to give your position away. This can technically see farther than the air search, surface search, but this is just air. And of course, that would be the biggest threat. You're looking at missiles, you're looking at planes, but I would still want to have an E2C there to also detect missiles and surface contacts at the same time. What else are we getting? We're getting the ES-3B Viking. This is the S-3B. Do they not carry the ES-3B? I guess not. As for the A6, still the same with the Shrike anti-ship missile. Sorry, the Shrike anti-radiation missile. Now, this is one of the ships. There's also the Quesan type aircraft carrier. These are more akin to landing platforms. Well, landing platforms and helicopter carriers, but they're actually more than that. Because this thing can launch an F-14, believe it or not. So this aircraft carrier landing platform thing is capable of also going on the offensive with helicopters. It has an E-2C, it has a couple of Tomcats, it has some A-6s, you have the S-3s. You have lots of options aboard this carrier, but it displaces much, much, much less than the Enterprise. The Enterprise is a 90,000 ton carrier. This thing is only 49,000 tons. And you can see that all of these ships have their own story. Born out of the CVV program of the mid-1970s and the insistence from POTUS for a cheaper alternative to large and very expensive nuclear supercarriers like the Enterprise and Nimitz, the Quesan was envisioned to fulfill just that role. Capable of an air wing with up to 40 aircraft, so much less, under optimal conditions, the Quesan is derived from the design of the Tarawa class design, replacing a significant amount of the amphibious warfare facilities with additional aviation facilities and a much larger hangar. So I'd say that makes these things very interesting to use, because you don't always need the massive power projection that an Enterprise can deploy. If these smaller carriers can work, why not? If you don't need all these aircraft, why not? That's the Quesan. Can she defend herself? Yes, but not as well. She carries some Sea Sparrows. She even has the 5-inchers that you might be familiar with from the Tarawa. And she is capable of defending herself with a couple of 20mm Mark 15 guns. Outside of that, her striking power falls to the air wing, and her detection... Well, she gets a couple of air search radars, but I'd say that they are not as good as the radars that the Enterprise gets. But hey, she's a budget option, if you will. Next up, we have West Virginia. Over here's the Virginia, but here is the West Virginia. What did you do to my battleship? Well, we took off the turrets, sir, and we replaced them with some pretty hefty VLS capability. Because this is the West Virginia, a BBG-72, and she comes with all sorts of goodies. Some of them you might be familiar with. These are anti-ship Tomahawks, these are land attack Tomahawks. But what's the RGM-109? Well, that thing can do anti-submarine and anti... Wait, what? Yes, it's an anti-submarine missile. It's an American standoff, an anti-ship, anti-submarine weapon, active radar seeker. It carries a torpedo submunition and serves as the American counterpart to the Silex. However, the Silex has a range, from my mind, of 14 miles. This thing can hit you out to 150. So, let's say that you're hunting something with a helicopter. Helicopter finds something. Helicopter says, here's a torpedo. Submarine dodges. Helicopter says, here's another torpedo. Submarine dodges. And then the West Virginia says, fine, I'll handle it. And the West Virginia just says, hey dude, here I have a missile for you. And that missile is going to carry a torpedo. It is just that straightforward. So, let's see how this thing actually gets delivered. Also, I think it flies a bit faster than a Silex, but I might be mistaken about that. Yep. And there you go. Now you have a Mark 46. Very, very nice weapon system if you are ever dealing with a submarine that does not get killed off by your helicopter. What's the RGM-111? That's the Zeus. The Zeus is a successor to, or rather, yeah, it's sort of a successor to the Tomahawk, but it says here it's the large supersonic anti-ship when harpoons or Tomahawks don't make the cut. They have a range of 378 miles, so that's definitely on par with the shipwreck. And they can fly 1700 knots on the way there. They can also attack installations, but shore targets only. So I'm thinking if there is maybe an AA position next to it, that's going to ignore it. As for the rest, 122 standard missiles. So yes, this is a complete no-fly zone. If that doesn't do it enough for you, well, we got the Sea Phoenix out to 113 miles, which you can also use in a secondary anti-surface role. If everything else fails, you still have the trusty old Harpoon, That comes down to it. As for the rest, we have the 5-inch guns installed. They didn't take away those, so she can still do some, I'd say, limited short bombardment with a couple of 5-inch guns. They are, I'd say, improved, though, at the 15.8 miles. Normally, you don't quite get that range. Another battleship added is Montana. Now, the Montana versus Iowa has a difference. It has 4 turrets as opposed to Iowa's 3. That means she has even more potential when trying to engage surface targets, if they're old enough, or land attacks. So with this, you can shoot out to 20.9 miles, and the enemy is going to have a very hard time trying to defend against that. You can shoot down a missile, but you can't really shoot down a projectile like this. As for the rest, a couple of RIM 54 Alphas, so she can defend herself against air attack out to 113 miles. Does she come with the radar to back that up? Yeah, I'd say so. She has a range of 250 miles. She also has a surface search, which is not going to be that useful. But hey, a Spy 1. She can see 300 miles. I think that's these panels up here on her tower. So with those panels, she can see extremely far away. And she's going to even have to be quite patient in order to get into range for those RIM 54s to actually be useful. Next up, the Iowa. I don't believe that they changed much about the Iowa, but it is listed here. The Iowa itself, a very potent warship, of course. It comes with land attack, anti-ship tomahawks, that is, anti-ship harpoons. So you have multiple options. But there's also the Iowa Aegis version, in which case they get the RIM 54 Alpha, so the Seam Phoenix. The same as I just showed you. And I think that they also get, yep, there it is, the Spy 1 Alpha radar. So again, she has the same potential as the Montana. She's just slightly smaller doing it. Next, we have the Fort Valley class. I believe that the Fort Kent is one of her type. These 8 ships of the Fort Valley class are custom-designed landing platform docks, so LPDs, which combine large floodable well decks, it's typically in the back over there, with a significant flight deck and command and control facilities. They have LCUs, that's landing craft utility, to move vehicles ashore. They carry more vehicles than a typical LHA, but significantly less air assets. Something that I don't quite understand is that actually it might be because this is the VLS type. Let's see if we can find this thing, because we got so many ship types these days. What do you fall under? A landing ship here. The Fort Valley class. It says that they carry a flight deck, but this ship doesn't actually do that. What it does have is a couple of VLS cells out here on the bow, and those can shoot out a standard missile or a couple of land attack tomahawks and even sea attack tomahawks in case she gets threatened. How she's going to defend herself is not really that big of a deal, I'd say, because if this thing gets under attack, then the outer ring has failed, and you have messed up somewhere else. Okay, what comes next? Well, we have the Cambridge, or the Cambridge, and it has this massive, massive head. This thing has a couple of different versions of it. This is the Missile Cruiser 89 Design Alpha. A couple of different missiles are available. And you can see that she has VLS on the bow. That's large VLS. She has VLS amidships. She even has some... Actually, no, that's her hangar. She doesn't have VLS astern. She carries a Sea Sprite, so with that, she can start to defend herself against submarines as well. Unfortunately, she does not get that very nice long-range anti-submarine weapon. But then again, that's not really their point. These things were designed as a response to the Kirov. So a submarine or anti-submarine duties, I'd say, are secondary to her role. Not necessarily her primary role, but she needs to be able to do that. And that's exactly why she has the helicopters. Following the acquisition of concrete information on the nature of the new Soviet cruisers, President Reagan ordered a direct counter to be developed starting in 1981, with a deadline for a concrete design placed at December 1st, 1982. These guys have a modernized Mark 71 8-inch gun. That is this thing over here, shooting out to 15.8 miles, so potential shore bombardment or pestering some fishermen if they're not actually answering your call. She has the Mark 31 VLS, and she has the Zeus. That is that extremely long-range missile that we also saw on some of the other ships. This is, from what I've seen, exclusive to Twilight of Empires. So this missile, very dangerous against surface units, very dangerous at range. It's basically an American shipwreck. And the more ships have that on your fleet, the happier you'll be. As for defense, some very old Sea Sparrows and some much more modern Standard Missile 2 medium range with 90-mile range. And you can see that she carries a lot of those Mark 41 VLS. So it's very easy for her to throw those things out. Comes equipped with the Harpoon Delta, up to 80-mile range. Comes equipped with Tomahawks. Comes equipped with only 16 of the Zeus. So be careful. Don't spend them all at once. Because you will then have to fall back to your Tomahawks. And if that doesn't work, well, I suppose it's down to Standard Missiles. And after that, it's down to Harpoons. So that is the Cambridge class. Here's the Alaska. Very interesting design. I quite like the way that she's built. Interesting design because she has her hangar, and then she has more VLS behind the hangar and the flight deck. Normally, I'd say that the flight deck is the sternmost part of the ship. With Alaska, that's not the case. Now, what does she bring to the table? She is an CSGN. That is a cruiser nuclear strike capable. So, CS, cruiser strike, guided nuclear. We're the product of a nearly decade-long strike cruiser program. The first ship of the type, the Alaska, would be laid down in 1980 with 4 additional ships being built over the next 6 years. Again, this is all fictional. This is all written up by the imagination of the scenario, not the scenario designer, of Gold Leader 108. These things come equipped with the Spy 1B. 432 miles of air search. It's nice on paper. In practice, it remains to be seen whether these things will actually be that useful in that role. Because if you want to have that range, you also have to have your target really high up. If they are, in fact, quite high up, you can engage them with the Standard Missile 2. And that's pretty much all they got. They have a couple of other missiles available. And I believe there are a few different versions of the Alaska, which makes this all the more interesting. Missile Cruiser, Alaska... Yeah, we got the Alaska Mark 26 version, which comes equipped with some older gear, such as even the RUR-5, the ASROC. This one doesn't carry that anymore. These were, let's say, the more modern versions of the Alaska, the VLS birds, or the VLS units. So that is Alaska. Next, Virginia. Virginia is another missile cruiser. It's a slightly different type. It is definitely heavy on the VLS part. And again, I believe that we have different types for these. Virginia, look at that list. It just goes on and on and on. Yeah, we got a standard VLS and we got a VLS Heavy. So what does the VLS Heavy have? More VLS, more better. It's basically a platform with lots and lots and lots of missiles on it. That is really all that she's got. She has no helicopter deck, which makes her a bit fragile when it comes to dealing with submarines. She does have an active sonar array, a low-frequency one at that. I wouldn't strictly trust her to use that hull-mounted sonar to detect a whole lot, but supposedly her passive range is 60 kilometers, or about 30 miles. So that's still a substantial amount of range. Whether that'll be enough to stop any submarine remains to be seen, and even if you do spot the submarine, you can actually engage it. This thing is purely a strike cruiser, and is capable of going after air targets. She carries 135 standard missiles, Tomahawks, Tomahawk and ship, harpoons, and the rest is just some let's say, like, minor guns. The ship is definitely very good at air defense, especially with her radars and her somewhat limited strike capability. She can be useful to the fleet, but especially in an anti-air role. That is Virginia. We're going to move on to the Long Beach. Where is Long Beach at? Here she is. Another one of those bobblehead cruisers. And in that bobblehead, she hides the... Well, we got the air search radar here, the 250 miles. We got a surface search for 56, and we got a hull-mounted sonar. So what is that? I guess that is the SPS-49. This means that the Long Beach is an older ship, built between 1957 and 1971. So that's when we had these older air search systems. Actually, she doesn't have any... Yeah, I think this is the pre-spy version. Because typically they had the spy panels on there, I think. Anyway, again, a bit more of an anti-air role. She does come with torpedoes this time around. No flight deck. And lots of missiles. She carries Mark 41 launch cells for basically anything. Except for the ASROC. The ASROC... Hold on, they changed the ASROC at some point. Yeah, there's the ASROC, right there. At some point they began modernizing the ASROC, and they turned the ASROC from a torpedo missile launcher, if you want to call it that, to something that can also throw out harpoons. So that's what this ASROC thing is now capable of doing. Role for this ship? I'd say anti-air, as well as anti-ship. With 33 Tomahawk anti-ship missiles, you can strike out to 243 miles, provided you can see that far. And that is definitely going to cause a lot of issues with the Soviets or other targets to intercept all of those missiles. Next up, the Willis A Lee. This is a destroyer. A destroyer that can punch way above its weight class, because this thing has the Zeus. So once again, we can strike out to 378 miles. You wouldn't typically expect that capability from a destroyer. At least for Soviet ships, it falls more under the cruiser department. But this destroyer can definitely hurt you from very far away. Let me just show you what that looks like on the map. That's how far I can shoot. That's basically a no-sail zone. You come in here, you're going to have a problem. And there it goes. Off you go. The model that they use is probably just a shipwreck. It's the easiest way to go about it. It's just an American version of the shipwreck. What else does the Lee do? First built at the end of the 1970s and early mid-1980s, it's a guided missile destroyer to satisfy the desires from the Navy for a class of fleet destroyers that can perform its anti-submarine as well as the Spruance, while also carrying an anti-ship punch. A hefty anti-ship punch, that is, with the Zeus. She comes equipped with a lot of different missiles. You have the Sea Sparrow, which again is my least favorite missile because it takes half an hour to reload after you shoot 8 times. Then we have the RIM 54 Sea Phoenix out to 130 miles. We have a couple of those Zeuses for anti-ship capabilities. We have the RGM-84A, mind that's the 65-mile version. We have a Tomahawk of the ASUW version. This is the one that drops the torpedo. We have a couple of land attackers, but it's more of an afterthought since you only carry 4. She comes with chaff, she comes with Seaways, she comes with a couple of 5-inchers. A couple? Yeah, 1 bow, 1 stern. And she has a helicopter aboard in the form of the SH-2F. Either ASW or ferry loadout, but typically I'd use this. Did they nerf these things, or did they... No, never mind, that was a different helo. I'm thinking of a different helo that carries a lot more weapons. No, a lot more sonobuoys. So that's the Willis A Lee. On to the Kid. Here's the Kid. The Kid's been modernized. She now carries a VLS. How about that? And with this VLS, she can definitely do some more anti-air ops. You can see that a lot of these American ships have very good standard missiles. And they typically all carry the RIM 66 Standard Missile 2 medium range. Because it is just a very versatile missile. You can go after surface targets, you can go after air targets, it's fast, it's easy to guide. I like this missile a lot, and it does perfectly line up with the US doctrine of we're going to send in the ships to defend the cruiser, sorry, to defend the carrier, and have the carrier do the actual strikes. If you don't want to use the carrier to do the strikes, of course you get access to the Zeus nowadays, so that is an option. As for the other capabilities of the Kid, harpoons, tomahawks, guns, and some helos to boost. Then, moving on to the Brook. Here's the Brook. Interesting design, I'd say. Guided missile frigate. Cheap thing. Doesn't carry much. Carries a couple of standard missile 1s, so that's the older one, out to 24.7 miles. It's a very substantial difference from the standard missile 2. This thing is, I'd say, much more designed to go after some submarines. It can do that. It has the ASROC. It has the Mark 46. It is, however, a pretty old ship, at least for, I'd say, this era. Designed in 1966, commissioned 1966. The final 6th unit was decommissioned in 1989. So, yeah, they are not great for what they can do. But if you have a helicopter aboard a ship, it can still very much give any submarine a big headache. So, yes, they're not as capable as some of these other ships that I've shown you, but I wouldn't discard them or discount them. And then over here, we have the Benjamin Franklin. The Benjamin Franklin comes with a couple of different versions. We have the Zeus B, and the Zeus N. You're presently looking at the Benjamin Franklin, which is in the Zeus N configuration. And the Zeus N carries the UGM-111N, which is the, let's say I'm going to kill everything. It's the version 2 of the Zeus out to 1,000 miles. And this thing supposedly is nuclear capable. It has much more range than those missiles launched by the surface ships. By, 650 miles extra. The UGM-111N is a nuclear-tipped variant with greater range to provide nuclear deterrent for the Franklin-class boats. This is just a standoff, let's say second strike-capable ship. You don't typically see these things, you don't typically hear them, but they might be a target for a scenario. They can defend themselves somewhat with the Mark 48. Not to discard the Mark 48, but you don't really want to be hunted in one of these things, because they don't run away that well at 21 knots. They don't defend themselves that well. So in those roles, yeah. This is just a boomer. Leave it outside somewhere and try not to have it get engaged. As for the aircraft, we have the F-14B up here. This one is carrying the AIM-54 Charlie, the AIM-9, and the AIM-7. But we also get the loadout where you carry that AIM-98, that Seekbat. And the F-14 Delta over here has the AIM-98 installed. You can see that's a massive, massive missile. That is definitely going to have the booster phase in the back. Booster phase detaches and then the rest of the missile engages. How far can I shoot that? Pretty far, but I think I might need a target for that. Let's go and target the missile. There she goes. Let me lock on to the missile here. There she goes. Thing goes almost vertical. It's going to try and intercept my outbound Zeus missile. I bid it good luck, because this thing's not slow either. There's the booster getting dropped, and I think at this point it kind of turns into an AIM-54. It just goes up to extreme altitude to reach both high speeds as well as a lot of fuel efficiency. The final aircraft for the US, at least for right now, which is in the log, is the ES-3D. So it's an S-3D Viking, but it's been turned into an airborne early warning system. This thing now carries a hefty radar on its back. It, interestingly, still has its magnetic anomaly detector. So if you're in a pinch, in the extremely rare situation where you also need to find a submarine, you can by just flying very low over the water. But that kind of negates the whole need for this. 250 mile range, long-range air search for airborne early warning. It can search air and, of course, it can search surface. Now, again, this is just the US part of this massive, massive mod, Twilight of Empires. If there is enough demand, I will also do a video on the other parts of this mod, because there are lots of new ships for the US Navy. Sorry, for the US Navy, but also lots of ships for the British, some for the Royal Australian, for the Royal Canadian Navy, for the Japanese, for the French. For the West German, there is a new Tomcat. The Argentine Navy, Argentine Armada has some ships. The Chilean Armada, the Soviet Navy, the Islamic Iranian Navy. There's a lot of stuff in this mod. Let me know what your thoughts are below. I look forward to playing a scenario with these new units, although it's probably going to take me a while to figure out what does what. But hey, that's part of the charm of using a mod. Thank you for watching, hope you've enjoyed, and I'll see you soon for more videos.